Okay, welcome to the legislative briefing on expanding childcare spaces, infrastructure funds for shovel-ready projects. My name is Erica Erickson, and I am the Policy and Program Officer for Early Care and Education at the Low-Income Investment Fund. It's my honor to be here to facilitate, to host a conversation about the state of early learning care facilities infrastructure and policy recommendations to address the urgent need to expand childcare spaces, not only here in California, but around the country. And I am here with leaders in early care and education, including representatives of early learning centers with shovel-ready projects, and including Angie Garling, National Director for Early Care and Education at the Low-Income Investment Fund, Jennifer Brooks, ECE Strategic Stabilization Campaign Director, Sam Ruiz, Chief Executive Officer at the Mission Neighborhood Centers in San Francisco, Layton, President and CEO of Educational Enrichment Systems in Santiago, Pamm, Vice President for Strategic Funding and Partnerships at the YMCA of East Bay, and Eileen Monahan, Early Care and Education Consultant. So some logistics to start. This event is being held as in webinar mode, what means that all participants, all attendees are muted. And if you would like to pose any questions, you can use the Q&A box or the chat. And we are going to start with an overview of the work of the Low-Income Investment Fund on ECE with Angie Garling, followed by Jennifer Brooks, that's going to share information about the ECE Strategic Stabilization Campaign. After that, we are going to have Eileen Monahan facilitating the panel with Pamm, Robin, and Sam, when they will share information about their projects and their centers in general. So if, with no further ado, I will pass the word to Angie.
Great, thank you, Erica. It's nice to be here today. I'm Angie Garling, the National ECE Director for the Low-Income Investment Fund. We're a community development financial institution, which basically means that sometimes we act like a nonprofit and sometimes we act like a bank. We do a lot of loans across the country, and we have offices on the East Coast, in the South, as well as the West Coast. Our headquarters is in San Francisco, and we have a large early care and education program that is mostly run on grants and contracts. And our main program is that we provide three services. We provide grants to acquire buildings, to finance buildings for pre-development, construction, repair and renovation. And we wrap that in with very robust technical assistance because, as you all know, in the field of early care and education, we don't get into this business to be real estate project managers. And so we help programs and operators understand how to raise money for a new facilities project and to stabilize and sustain their business. The third thing we do is we promote supportive policies. And a lot of that has come out of the great work that's been done in San Francisco. We also have robust programs in Washington, DC and New York City. And briefly, what happened when the pandemic hit is that we talked to many of our grantees and asked them what they needed. And what we originally planned to be a $5 million effort to provide emergency operating grants and relief funds to family childcare providers and childcare centers in our 3 geographies has now turned into a $10 million program. And that's really by identifying funds in 3 ways. One is that we referred over 100 ECE operators to the payroll protection program and enabled them to get over $6.6 million in loans that will be mostly forgiven. We raised several $1 million in private philanthropy, and then we also identified money that was already in our government contracts and repurposed it for operating grants and repair and renovation grants around reopening and new COVID requirements. And that's given us a lot of lessons learned. The third thing is that we do work throughout California. Erica is working on launching Build Up California, which is one of the reasons we have this webinar today, this legislative briefing. And then we also are the facilities lead on the master plan for early learning and care. So that's a little bit about LIF. We really focus on facilities and stabilization around businesses as for early care and education. I wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that we have a comprehensive system in early care and education, and there are many components to that system. And one of them that is very important, not the only one, but a very important one, is around facilities. Luckily, at the federal level, we've had a lot of congressional representatives recognize that. And Erica is going to share a slide to show you sort of visually what that looks like. So the first thing is that we have a federal act called Child Care as Essential Act, which would allocate $50 billion for early care and education. And the fact that it's in green means it's already been passed by the House. And then we also have another legislative vehicle called the Child Care's Infrastructure Act, which is actually included in the other two boxes that are green, the HR 2 Moving Forward Act and the Child Care for Economic Recovery Act. And that would provide a separate $10 billion effort to improve facilities across the country through competitive grants using an intermediary model similar to the way that LIF operates its grants. And so these are really helpful and important things, because right now with the main funding source for childcare in our country, CCDBG, we actually can't use that for facilities unless you are a tribe. So we really need additional funding for facilities, not just for COVID recovery, but for ongoing stabilization to meet the huge growing and unmet need for early care and education. So Erica, you can go ahead and stop sharing. And I just wanted to say there is an active effort to talk to congressional representatives to tell them that families, communities, and businesses can't wait. We need another COVID relief package now. On the Democratic side, on the House side, they have allocated $50 billion for early care and education, and on the Republican side, $15 billion. Unfortunately, the Senate has recessed without taking up or the Congress coming to full agreement on a COVID stimulus, a most recent COVID stimulus package. So we do have an advocacy opportunity by the time the Senate reconvenes in early September, and to keep the message strong that we need at least $50 billion stabilization funding for childcare in the next package, including funding for facilities. So that's a little bit of an update on the federal level, and we will be sure to include resources for how you can log into media kits and sample letters to talk to your local representatives and make sure that they know how important it is to allocate funding for early care and education. The last thing is talking about what's happened at the state level, just to refresh your memories, if or for those of you who are new, that the governor in the last budget had allocated $263 million for an ECE infrastructure grant program, which would have really committed good funds to start funding facilities. Of course, this was before COVID and before the recession. And unfortunately, through the May revise and in the very end of the budget, all of that money, 100% of it has been swept. And then this has created not just a disappointment in that we are unable to allocate funding for facilities. We understand that given the recession, we wanted to ensure that rates could be preserved and other very crucial things to the early care and education system. But it has also taken away the opportunity for matching funds or additional funding for shovel-ready projects that are already in process. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Jennifer Brooks, who's the director of the ECE Strategic Stabilization Campaign, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about that campaign. And we're going to hear more from our panelists about shovel-ready projects that are already started that need additional funding to come to fruition. Thank you, and I'll hand it over to Jennifer.
All right, thanks everyone. Let's see if I can launch my presentation. Okay, how does it look? Good? All right. Thank you. I am Jennifer Brooks, the campaign director for the ECE Strategic Stabilization Campaign. What I'm going to do in the limited time that I have is I'm going to start out by giving you just a little bit of very brief background on the origins of this campaign, our agenda, and our timeline of activities. I'm going to talk a little bit about the strategies that we've been employing and to what effect. And then I'm going to end with a real call to action, which I hope will encourage each one of you to make your voice heard on this really important issue. So starting out with where did we come from? So this strategic stabilization campaign is really being led and funded by Mission Neighborhood Centers. And I won't talk much about Mission Neighborhood Centers because Sam's gonna go next and he'll do a much better job at that than I would. But it is an ECE program based in San Francisco. We started out very locally with similar programs like MNC that had shovel-ready or in-process projects and mobilized them. But quickly, as things have been changing so fast over the past couple of months, this became a true statewide effort. So leading up to the governor's May budget revision that Angie mentioned, we actually started out with a fairly broad agenda that included not just funding to preserve a portion of the $263 million that had been promised for 2019 and beyond, or 2020 and beyond. We also were focusing on regionalizing rates, which started as regionalizing rates, and then as soon as the May revise came out and we saw that the governor was proposing to make a 10% cut, that turned into complete defensive mode rather than the more progressive agenda around regionalizing those rates. And then the third piece was around creating some additional flexibility in higher cost counties around family income eligibility as a way to help programs maintain full enrollment in this crazy time where folks are opening and closing, et cetera. So it was, I have to say, a huge victory for the overall ECE field that we were able to effectively fight to reject the 10% rate cuts. However, the casualty of that effort was that, as Angie said, we lost all of the funding for infrastructure. So what we've been doing throughout the summer, we haven't given up. This is a unique year in the legislature. Everyone says none of it's been done before, so we're kind of all walking new ground. Is that we have become laser-like focused on restoring $50 million of the $263 million that was supposed to go out in 2019. And we're really prioritizing that the funding go to in-process and shovel-ready construction projects. We have really marshaled a pretty comprehensive team that is on parallel tracks, taking some insider strategies as well as some outsider strategies to make sure that our voices are heard and our message comes across. To give you a couple of examples of what we've been up to. So the first piece was really around documenting the need, documenting the fact that there were programs across the state that had been counting on this money in order to complete projects. We surveyed the field in partnership with Every Child California, and we're able to identify nearly 60 projects that were counting on this money and had already begun to do some work around that. That survey also allowed us to estimate the amount of money that was actually needed, and quite coincidentally, it worked out to be $50 million that these 59 programs would need in order to complete their projects. And we could estimate the number of children who right now are receiving distance learning services who would be able to come back into the classroom. So with this $50 million investment, we estimate that 3,000 children will be able to go back into the classroom. And after the need for social distancing is over, those spots will add capacity on top of pre-pandemic levels up to 5,000 additional children. So that's been a hugely valuable tool in order to make the case for what's needed. We also mobilized many of those programs that we identified through the survey to advocate directly with their legislators. And the great result was that we got 7 legislators who had shovel-ready projects in their districts signed onto a letter that we sent to the governor and the leadership of the legislature at the end of July. A second thing that we did, which was more, I would suppose, insider, is with the help of a lobbying firm in Sacramento, we have talked to each and every member of our staff for the budget committees and for the joint Senate and Assembly Economic Stimulus Working Group. And we've also done some work kind of deploying some of our political capital to reach decision makers within the administration. So the great news is that we are making headway, and we have signals from the Joint Assembly Senate Working Group that they are supportive of including the ECE infrastructure ask in the economic stimulus bill that they are working on. Go back to the timeline here for a second. So where are we now? This piece of the party anyway, all wraps up at the end of next week. So we have in less than 2 weeks, all of this advocacy will come to a head, and we have some important advocacy to do. As you may know, the administration ultimately has the final say about what gets passed and what doesn't get passed, or what gets signed into law rather. And we have not yet received confirmation from the administration that they're supportive. So we need to make our voices known and heard very loudly, and we need to do it quickly. So if you take nothing away from this, it's kind of the urgency of the need to take action here. So here is my call to action for all of you. So the key messages that we want to convey are, first off, that there is an urgent need because of social distancing, and the public health need for social distancing because of COVID-19. Capacity is reduced 50 to 75% across the state. That means that 200,000 low-income children who had care before the pandemic are receiving only distance learning at this point. So real urgent need. The second piece is around the impact of inaction. What happens if we fail to pass this? What is the impact on children, their families, and their communities? If children miss this important early opportunity, they're going to start out school behind, and we all know what that means is that will lead to a lifetime of inequitable outcomes. If families can't work, they can't pay their bills, they're not putting food on the table, they're not, their health is at risk, their housing's at risk, and communities become destabilized. So really making that important point that this really matters. And then I think the third point, because when we talk about infrastructure, people often think we're talking about something far off in the future that one might defer, but it's really the urgency of this effort and our ability to quickly build more space. So on that slide I showed a few minutes ago, we have the dates of when these projects are expected to be complete, and some of them are literally just a few months away. So the fact that we can actually solve some of this problem right now is important to convey. So as soon as I stop talking, I'm actually going to paste a link to a document in the chat feature. And in that document is 3 really simple instructions for how you can get your message out and into the governor's and his staff's hands. There is draft language there. All you need to do is copy and paste that into a document with your own letterhead. There's some fill in the blanks where you can customize the information with your program's information. And then there's an email for Ann O'Leary, who is the governor's chief of staff. And that's it. And I guarantee that if you open up this link while we're still on this webinar, it will increase the likelihood that you actually hit send on that email dramatically. And I think afterwards, Erica's also going to send a follow-up email with some of this additional information. So I really encourage you to support this effort. This funding is critical, and to enable us to get it, to restore the funds, your voice is critical too. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And again, reminder to participants, if you have any questions, you can share on the comment box or Q&A box, and then we will have a Q&A session at the end of the panel presentation. So I want to invite Eileen to facilitate the panel now.
All right, thanks, Erica. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Eileen Monahan, and I'm an early care and education consultant focused on child care facilities as well as business and community initiatives related to child care. I've been a part of the LINK group for over 15 years, which was focused on child care facilities. I'm a founding member of the Build Up California group, and I have the fortune of working with LIF on the facilities team for the Master Plan for Early Learning and Care. So for this section of the agenda, we have the opportunity to hear from actual childcare operators who are on the ground trying to expand or start up their facilities. I think their stories are really going to help us all understand what life is like now for operators and understand the nuances that are going on and then how we can help. So the format is going to be each presenter will share with you for about 10 minutes, and I'll give them hopefully a graceful warning at 8 minutes. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'll do that. And then we will quickly move on to the next person, and we'll have time at the end for questions. So as you hear their stories, if you have questions, please, I think Erica just posted something, but please add to the Q&A function any questions that you have. It's at the bottom of your screen if you're not familiar with it. And then we'll hold those questions and organize them and then share them back with the presenters during the question and answer phase. So we're going to start with Sam Ruiz. We're ready to hear from you.
Appreciate the invitation to be part of this panel discussion this afternoon. Hello, can folks hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, thank you. So I believe before I start with this brief, probably 9-minute presentation, that I need to identify 2 facts that bonds both the presenters, the 3 of us this afternoon, as well as many of you who are taking part of this presentation. One of the facts is that there is an unwavering commitment by each one of us to provide our working poor families and their children with access to high quality early learning systems, as well as centers, right, and opportunities at large. The second factor that bonds us is that we're subjugated to the whims, literally, of the California Department of Education, the Early Care Learning Division, who, in my humble professional opinion, has no vision whatsoever for our children and their future, not at least in the state of California. If you don't agree with me right now, I think when I conclude this presentation, you will, in fact, agree that the California Department of Education lacks a commitment to our working poor families of color primarily. And so in our quest to be consistent with our commitment to support our community and the mission community in San Francisco, we provide what we refer to as cradle to rocking chair services. Our cradle services basically consist of early care programs that identify 3 groups, 3 separate age groups, 1 infant, 2nd toddler, and 3rd preschool. About 3 years ago, we began to receive a consistent message from the Office of Head Start, as they're one of our funding sources, as well as Early Head Start and California Department of Education. But Head Start all of a sudden had this sight or this vision that for decades lacked, and that was that they came to this conclusion that what our Head Start and working poor families needed was full day, full year Head Start services, not part day, part year, which is basically what the Head Start program is all about and has been for decades in the States. And so we wanted to make sure that we also were consistent, not just with their new drive and this new paradigm, but also consistent with our community planning process that identified that what our families needed was in fact full day, full year early care services. And so we engaged in a capital campaign that would double the number of facilities so that we can continue to provide services to the same number of families, but transition from part day to full day. And so with that in mind, we then, if you could move to the next slide, por favor, Erica. We then identified what sites we needed to upgrade, what facilities we needed to close, and how many sites we needed to secure in order to sustain the same level of slots and services that we were providing, with a shift also in age groups. What we identified was a drastic, severe critical need for both infant and toddler services versus services for children 4 years and up. And so we shifted our service delivery system. And as we identify these new facilities, we made sure that the purpose of opening up these facilities was going to be primarily to address the needs of both infant and toddlers. If we could move to the next slide, please. And so this expansion model that we put into motion with 4 sites that we identified we required. Number one, we needed to make sure that we were facility ready, that we were program ready, and that we were finance ready. The facility ready meant that we needed to identify the sites in advance and have those sites in the pipeline. Number two, that we needed to identify funding that would support this expansion model. Now, let's remember, the expansion is not about additional slots. The expansion is about converting part day to full day, part year to full year. And finance ready is admitting the fact that we have properties that the corporation or the organization owns. And so we have assets at our disposal that we could utilize to leverage financial support if required as we moved on with this plan. The next slide will also identify a bit more of what this expansion model required and what process or steps we were taking to make sure that this would materialize. Can we move to the next slide, por favorcito, Erica? So, of course, we embarked in a thorough planning process that defined our program objectives. And of course, again, the thrust here is the conversion piece from part day to full day. And then we wanted to identify potential funding sources that would support this effort. And let's remember, this was pre-COVID. And then, of course, we needed to identify the fact that we require stacked funding, that we require support from the local Office of Early Care and Education. We require support from the California Department of Education and Head Start if we were going to make this project a reality. The amount that we required for these 4 sites was $14 million. And I do want to say that at this point, we have raised close to $10 million, and we have put 2 of the facilities in pause until we can complete this particular 2-facility process that we're engaged in as we speak. If we can look at the next slide, please. And so what we require was basically support from a team of consultants that would primarily focus on one of the biggest discrepancies that we were experiencing. And that was that philanthropic sector, the city, and even the feds were saying, yes, we will support this expansion. And this expansion plan generated funding for expansion services from the federal government, from the Office of Head Start and Early Head Start. So we had partners already in place. The local Office of Early Care and Education as well identified their support by referring us to LIFT, who was the recipient of what are dollars that are generated from developers' fees in the city and county of San Francisco. So we were able to identify all partners who would be contributors to this process and would infuse a certain amount of dollars to make this a reality. Everyone was a willing participant except the state. Now, we were already lobbying the state. Fortunately, we had a good relationship with the governor. We were already talking about his platform during his inauguration, right? And we identified the fact that he was going to present early care and education as his #1 priority, which he did then. And that changed, as we all know now, right? If we move to the next slide, please.
Sam,
And
I'm sorry, you have 2 minutes left.
Okay, and so we were basically getting ready to extend or submit a proposal to the California Department of Education on the first 50 million of the 263 million for facilities that was approved by the governor. Next slide, por favor, Erica. And so what we did is we identified a facility that was the Mission Police Station. And this police station or this particular property was for sale. It had been purchased by a private individual from the city. We thought that it would be ideal to buy this facility for 2 reasons. Number one, that it could support all affordable housing in the future. Number two, that it could be renovated to provide early care services. And so we acquired the facility for $6.8 million. We've made an investment of $1.5 to rehab, and we're looking at hopefully post-COVID providing 84 children with full day, full year services that would include a family resource center on site. So this became a symbol, right? A symbol of hope that transitions, right, from an oppressive system, which is basically the incarceration of our children, right, to a symbol of hope for learning for our children and in our community. The next slide, please. So this is the outside now, but let's not spend too much time. My time is almost up. Next slide, please. And so this is the part that I challenge you or anyone who didn't understand my fact when I mentioned that the California Department of Education, the Early Care and Learning Division lacks vision for our families and our children. If you look at this pie, everyone has contributed. The city and county of San Francisco, there's new market tax credits, there's philanthropic dollars, and there's federal Head Start. What is missing here is the California Department of Education. It's beautiful that they augment the budget on an annual basis for additional slots, but if you don't have the facilities, ladies and gentlemen, what good does additional slots do, right? We need to own our own future, and the best way that we can do it is by purchasing, acquiring, buying our own property, building it out, to make sure that there's stability, not just in the community, but for our families at large, in whatever county we're providing services.
Thank you, Sam.
Okay.
That was
Thank you.
A very good description of what's going on. And remember, everyone, if you have questions about Sam's presentation, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A. I see a couple in there. All right, so next we go to Robin Layton. And Robin, can you let us know what you're working on and about in terms of developing childcare facilities? Robin, I think you're on mute.
Oh, you missed my whole presentation.
Yeah.
I'll start over. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I really appreciate being able to share an opportunity that we've had over the years and how I'm going to kind of run down through our history. We've been around for 41 years. I've actually been the president and CEO for 36 years. And our team has a lot of experience in trying to do my slides. So give me a second here, see if I can figure this out. It's not letting me share. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yep, we can see it.
There we go. Okay. So in 1979, we started with 3 child development centers and 100 students. And now we serve over 1,100 students at 20 centers throughout San Diego County. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll see why, based on our experience in building out and renovating, we are able to actually move forward with our shovel-ready projects, even without the state funding that did not go through. My first example is our toddler center. This used to be an old library, so it's owned by the city of San Diego. And as you can see, it over the 3 years that we were in the process of working out the city lease and also applying for CDBG funds, it became a crack house. You can see the graffiti and the glass. And $500,000 later, we were able to open this cute little school to serve 40 toddlers. And the city just renewed the lease for another 20 years. So we're very excited about that, to continue to serve 40 toddlers in the community of Linda Vista in San Diego County. Our next project is the Jeff and Denny Jacobs Child Development Center, also in Linda Vista. This was a ground up construction project, and we also did a capital campaign and applied for a loan to build this out. Originally, it was going to be around $1 million. It ended up being $1.5 million. As you can see from the top left, the surprise underground water tower was an extra added cost for us, and also we experienced delays. Fast forward, we now have a beautiful flagship school. We have 6 classrooms. We serve 136 2 to 5-year-old students, full day year round. And the city just renewed this lease for another 20 years with some options. So long after I will be gone. Next, because it's been 20 years, we needed to renovate the playground. So last year we embarked on a design of a beautiful natural playground environment for the children. And we spent approximately $75,000 last year just on the demo and the design of the center, in hopes that we would be able to be a shovel-ready project. We also completed all the bids and got all the state approvals, and then discovered that because of the state and the city restrictions, the project's actually going to cost around $250,000 to construct, mainly because of the fact that being a city-owned property, we need to pay the contractor needs to pay prevailing wages. So we have all the approvals that we need, and we are going to move forward with that starting next week. And we are going to use state reserve funds as well as some grant funds that we have received. We have a very generous community here in San Diego. And one of the challenges right now and urgency is that this center did close in March. We reopened in June, but the children during COVID are not able to go outside because it's just dirt, and we have basically a closed construction site. So we're hoping this will get done in a few weeks. I want to talk about our partnership and why we were able to expand in Vista. We have a 12-year model partnership with Vista Unified School District. We're currently on 10 elementary school sites where we serve part day, part year children through the state preschool funding. But we're also, because the school district has made it a priority to serve more children, especially the year-round full day working families, we're on 4 other school district sites that I'll talk about. This is the David and Jillian Gilmore Early Education Center, and we renovated this into 5 classrooms, and you can see a beautiful outdoor environment. We served 98 students there and in 5 classrooms. And this was a $1.5 million renovation project, and it was funded 100% by Mr. and Mrs. Gilmore. So you can look them up, or if you want to know who they are, give me a call. The next center is our Innovation Center, and this is also a full day year-round center. We opened in 2017. We renovated 3 elementary school classrooms into a preschool environment. We serve 60 students ages 2 to 5, and this was funded through state loans and grants as well, more donations, but also the state funds. Our latest project is our shovel ready project. So in order to be shovel ready or even apply for a grant to the state, you have to have already had the design with the architect, completed the bidding, and get the state approvals. We did all of that last year, which cost money. So we tapped into some of our reserves and grant money in hopes that we would be able to apply for the new state funding. So now that we didn't get it, we had all the approvals, we still need to move forward. So we are tapping into some state loan funds, our reserves, as well as grants. This expansion will be for 44 more children, full day year round, and serve 2 to 5-year-olds. And I'd like to thank publicly the San Diego Foundation and Mr. Klum for making this expansion in North County possible. We are also going to be opening shortly, within the next couple months. We are in the licensing phase of another infant toddler center. We'll be serving 45 more students in the community of Vista. I've been doing this for 36 years, and I would actually like to thank the Department of Education. I think the Department of Education has done a fantastic job in supporting what actually comes down from the legislature and the administration. So with limited staff, I believe that they have always been supportive, and I really appreciate the work that they've done over the years to keep these programs going. And with the funding sometimes there and the funding sometimes not there, I think that we've all done the best that we can. I'd also like to thank the Senate, Assembly, and Administration for prioritizing early education. Without the, especially the Senate and Assembly leadership, we would not be here today having grown from 3 schools in 1979 to 20 and soon to be 22. So thank you so much, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you, Robin. That was great. And you were under time. Good job. You make my life easier. Okay, so, and lastly, we go to Pamm Shaw. And Pamm, we're all looking forward to hearing from you.
Can you see the PowerPoint? Or are you looking? Oh.
Yes. You might want to click the presentation mode.
Yeah, I will, but I was like.
Yeah, we can see it though.
Okay. Yeah, now I can see. Now I can see it too. Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Pamm Shaw with the YMCA of the East Bay. And we've got a bunch of projects ready. And I'm not going to reiterate what Robin or Sam already said about thank you, not thank you. We're just trying to do our job and serve the kids and families. We serve 1,200 low-income children and families in 4 counties. This year will be 23 locations. We're adding 2 more sites in the city of Hayward based on some expansion funding from the federal government there. 18 of those centers are directly operated, and we also have partners, which is a subcontract model with Head Start. All of the programs are state and federally funded. 95% of the kids are children of color, and all of the children receive the comprehensive services. We actually have more state money than federal money right now, but we wrap around as much as we can so that all of the kids get the services they need. We have 3 projects that are shovel ready, not quite as shovel ready as Robin with things, but the biggest one that we're looking at right now is in Cherryland and Hayward to serve 80 children. We also have former Y buildings in Richmond and Oakland that we're looking at renovating, and I'll talk about that in a second. So the Cherryland Center's on Mission Boulevard. For those of you who know the Bay Area, it's about 9,000 square feet. The Y bought this building because it's in one of the most low-income neighborhoods there, and the place where we're located currently is not serving the families that are most in need. So the area of Cherryland is 39% foreign-born, 50% Latinx, 23% poverty rate. We have funding secured already for this facility. We have $269,000 from Alameda County Community Development Block Grant funding, and that will pay for the outdoor space and playground. We also received $2.4 million, or on the verge of receiving $2.4 million in Office of Head Start startup money. We had thought that we were going to get funded for expansion through the Department of Ed because we scored so high on our application, and then that money was swept as well. So not only was the facility money swept, but other funding sources that might have supported projects like this were also swept because startup money often comes with expansion. So we are searching high and low for $2.5 million to finish this project, and we will do it one way or the other, and I'll explain how in a minute. The center in Oakland is an old Y building that's been underutilized, and that's to be renovated to serve 120 infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. Also in a really low income neighborhood that deserves beautiful facilities for kids. We need about 5 million to do that. We've got nothing on the books right now. And I will explain what that means. This is also another Y building in Richmond that we're looking to renovate and serve mostly infants and toddlers there, because the district runs a state preschool across the street. And so we don't want to step on their toes. We want to collaborate. And so the preschoolers can go across the street. The infants and toddlers can come right with us too. And that's, again, another 3 million thing. All of the buildings that we're doing, we look at state-of-the-art design. We look at engaging spaces and tools for inside and out where children can learn, grow, and build confidence. We're looking at providing comprehensive services. All of our programs provide mental health consultation, health, and other support services, including services for children with disabilities. Our programs are all fully inclusive, and a really positive workspace in an area that's challenged to retain experienced teachers. And an example of that is our Eastlake Center. It started out to be a $3 million renovation that wound up being $5.5 million, using predominantly federal and YMCA funding. It was gutted completely. It's about a 10,000 square foot building, just under 10,000 square feet. And this is what it looks like today. Serves children birth to 5. There's 90 children there, or there will be 90 children when we can serve fully. So, I mean, our goal in terms of remodeling, renewing, and renovating is looking at the funding. It's not just about the money. It's about building relationships with our funders, with public, private, individual donors. We've been doing capital campaigns for these things, and that pretty much came to a stop with COVID. I think somebody earlier talked about childcare providers do not have the expertise in building facilities. You know, who knew when I got a degree in early childhood education, I would be, you know, dealing with permits and bids and monitoring work and timelines and chasing contractors down when they've got another job that's, you know, easier for them to do that day, that week. So this has kind of become a whole thing, is early childhood facilities expertise. And I know LIFT provides a lot of the technical assistance, as do a few others. Other projects we're looking at are playgrounds and outdoor space, and this is becoming more critical. And those are located in the communities of Rodeo, and we have a migrant program up in Cortland. So the impact of COVID, our YMCA has laid off over 1,000 people. Our health clubs are closed, still closed, they can't open yet. And one of the issues for us is the health clubs make money that supports our early childhood programs. So when I said that the Y gave us $2 million to build the Eastlake Center, that came out of people joining the health clubs and contributing that to the success of our programs there. And that has become a huge loss for us as the health clubs are closed and the Y has laid off people. So for us, it's become a bigger issue than just facilities. It's become a whole agency issue. The private donors right now are focusing on COVID relief, and the facilities are not as big a priority as they might have been in the past. I talked about the expansion funding. With the group size requirements that are put in place right now because of COVID, we need better outdoor spaces. So when I look at the playground at that Rodeo site that I was just talking about, licensing cited us like 6 months ago because animals were using the yard as their toilets, and we had closed the playground. And in order to clean it up, we needed funding to do it. It's primarily state funded with a little bit of federal funding out there. And there was nothing from the state to be able to do this. We did have some reserve funding, and that's what we're looking at using right now, is a combination of what little federal money we have and reserve funds to do it, because that's no longer an option when we have to spend time outside with the kids. So that's it for me. I do speak quickly.
Great. Thank you so much, Pam. I want to thank you all again for taking the time to come and speak with us. It's been very informational for sure. We have a few questions here that people have posted. So I'm going to go ahead, and I have one question for each of you. And maybe you can just answer it, give us maybe a minute or so, and then we'll go on to the others and we'll see if any other questions come up. So one question is, how, Robin, you mentioned that you tapped into state funds and reserves to complete a project. What impact does that have on your programming?
That's a really good question. So those of you in the participation side of this webinar that know me, know that every time I have to tap into my operational budget or my reserves, that takes away from the opportunity of paying higher salaries. So it's a catch-22. Do we expand? Do we give raises? A lot of the funding that we have that pays out of the state is one time only, so I can't really pay raises. And as you know, one thing that I didn't mention is that along with all of the expansion, I have a whole nother team trying to figure out how to solve and hire in light of the fact that we do have a staffing crisis. The staffing crisis that we had pre-COVID has now gotten much larger. We have many employees now that are choosing not to come back to work, but I do have the majority that are working. And so our workforce subsidizes the cost of the childcare, and they're the ones that suffer the most. So any one-time grants that I can get for facilities or from our very generous community of San Diego, or if the state could figure out how to pass this $50 million, that would be wonderful. And that's more money that I could put into the programs.
Thank you, Robin.
Mm-hmm.
Sam, you had talked about maybe expecting more from the state for support. And we have a question that I'm going to give to you is, how would you suggest the state supports smaller agencies to do these kinds of projects and or to provide turnkey facilities to its contractors?
Well, can I be unmuted? Can folks hear me? Yeah? Okay.
Can hear.
So if you may recall, CDE had a facilities revolving loan fund that was to become a grant fund rather than loan. That fund has been put in abyss for the time being, but that is definitely one of the ways that the CDE could support our efforts to purchase, acquire, and build out facilities throughout the state. So that would be my response.
Great, thank you. And then let's see, for Pamm, what do you think is the most challenging part of the facilities development process for childcare providers?
Wow. Getting the money is always a challenge, and having everything lined up. The design is the most fun part. I mean, to be able to take a building that was used for something else and convert it into an amazing center and getting staff input into it and picking, from colors and furniture and all that stuff, that's the fun part. The money and then dealing with the contractors is challenging as well. The whole bid process, if you use federal funds, we have to do a grant application that's like really several inches thick in order to get the federal money. I think Sam and I both have lots of experience in using federal funds and startup funds and one-time only money to do some of these kinds of facilities things. And, but it's a lot of work to get the money. It's not the most challenging. I think the most challenging is kind of juggling everything when you make sure you're on time, on target, and on budget, because these projects take more than a year usually. And when you're funded for a year to try and get things done, it's almost impossible. It usually takes at least 2 years to do like a full-blown giant renovation.
It's a big puzzle. Okay, thank you, Pamm. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to turn the mic back over to Erica now.
Okay, thank you so much. So I want to remind everybody that this event is part of a series and it's being held by, be hosted by Build Up California, a collaborative dedicated to sustain and improve the supply of childcare facilities in California. So if you would like to join us, please send me an email and we will be building this network together. So this event is part of a series, and the name of the series is Building Blocks for Equitable Recovery. And it's basically focused on early learning facilities and the impact that COVID is having on our field. And next week, we have another legislative briefing that will be focused on family child care. And it will be held on Tuesday, August 25th at 1 p.m. And the name is Preserving family childcare spaces, funds for facilities, infrastructure, and business support. So I hope you join us. The invitation will go with our follow-up email for after we've finished this event. Today, you're going to receive the email with more information. So I think that do we have any final comments from panelists and Angie?
Yeah, so I wanted to say something, and I know that Robin did as well. So I just wanted to acknowledge the panelists and acknowledge the fact that they are large operators. They're large, experienced operators. And this is one of the reasons why they were able to have shovel-ready projects, because of their veteran status and their scale. And as one of the attendees asked, how are we going to be able to not just sustain the programs that we currently have, which are closing, but how are we going to get to, the big goal at the end, which is to actually expand our facilities? And, we are by no means focusing just on centers and large established agencies. Build Up California is really looking at the landscape of need that we have, not just centers, but family childcare, new centers, private centers, and not just looking at building separate buildings and repurposing. And I love the examples of repurposing from a library, from a gym, from a police station, but also looking at co-location, because we know that there is a large priority of our state, which is looking at increasing housing. So if we could, for example, increase the co-location of early care and education with housing, this would also help not just with transit, because then parents may not need to drive as much, the childcare would be there, but it would also help with design in larger buildings. So there are also policy changes and land use changes that we can make that as members of, as LIF is part of the master plan for early learning and care on facilities, is thinking about how can we ensure that the cataloging of available land and available buildings for housing can also potentially include early care and education, and can we look at, the unfortunate situation where some of our childcare programs are closing and potentially try to identify the space and hold on to the space. So, we want to continue to have this conversation with you, our attendees, and with other panelists on creative and bold solutions for how we can maintain and expand the quality early learning services in California.
This is Robin.
Robin.
Yeah, I'd like to say, just to remind everybody, at the beginning of my presentation, we used to be small. When we started, we only had 3 schools, and so to get fast forward, 41 years with 20 schools now, this is I could recommend a few things, but mainly everything that we did and are doing, we learned on the job, and also relationship building is key. And lots and lots of patience, So if you're small, you can do it, and we are out there and we're here for you. And so feel free to reach out to us or to LIP, and good luck.
Thank you. Any final words in call to action, Jennifer?
Just to send that letter today. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, and Erica, I just wanted to say that I love Robin's suggestion for help. And, one of the goals of Build Up California is to also be a knowledge exchange. So, we're looking for suggestions like that to build programs where, newer and smaller programs can learn from larger and more experienced programs. And that now that we, are doing a lot of this remotely, we can have people from all over the country and all over the state learning. So look forward to hosting more of these so we can build capacity at the local level, particularly in areas that are the most underserved.
Great. So with Sam, any final words? Oh, if you unmute yourself would be great.
Okay, I will echo what Jennifer just mentioned. Send out those letters of support. It's needed for all of us, regardless where you're at.
And Pam?
Thank you all for coming. Do the letter today. Mine is sitting on my desktop ready to go. And just thank you for your time. I look forward to hearing some of the other technical assistance things that are going to come down the road. We can all use the support. And like Robin said, we started small too. We all start from someplace, and we learn as we go. And don't be afraid to make mistakes, because you will. So.
Thank you everyone. Thanks for joining us today. All these speakers, Eileen, thanks for moderating the panel, Angie and everybody. Again, such an honor to be here. Please join us next week at the next legislative briefing on preserving family childcare spaces, August 25th at 1 p.m. Thank you so much for joining us, and you all we're going to receive an email after the recording. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Stay
Have a
safe.
good rest of the day. You too.